The party is finally over and the lights are turning off now. The music has stopped playing and the drunk guests are waking up. What happens when an entire country wakes up from a financial dream? In Part 2 we saw how Isaac Newton lost his entire fortune. We saw how greed and FOMO blinded the smartest minds in England. But today, in the final chapter, we will watch the bubble burst. We will see the devastation that follows, and the fantasy finally dies. It is September of the year 1720 and panic has arrived. The directors of the South Sea Company could not keep the secret. Rumors started to spread that the company had no actual assets left. The Spanish king had not agreed to any trade deals with them. The ships that were supposed to bring gold were essentially ghost ships. When this truth hit the streets of London, it hit very hard. The stock price, which was at £1,000, began to freefall. It dropped to 800, then 600 in a single week. Everyone who was buying yesterday was now screaming to sell their shares. But in a market crash, liquidity disappears like water in a desert. There was nobody left to buy the stock at any price level. The shopkeepers, the widows, the soldiers, and the lords were all trapped. They held pieces of paper that were now completely worthless in value. The price crashed all the way down to £100 again in less than a month. 90% of the wealth was destroyed. Imagine working your entire life to save money for your family's future and then watching it vanish in a few days because of lies. The aftermath of the crash was not just financial, it was physical. Suicide skyrocketed across London as people realized they had lost everything they owned. The Postmaster General of England took poison to escape his public shame. Lords and dukes who had gambled their estates were now homeless beggars. The economy of Great Britain came to a complete and total standstill. Banks closed their doors because they had lent money to buy stock. Trade stopped because nobody trusted anyone else to pay their debts anymore. The anger in the streets was so high that Parliament was terrified. The people wanted blood and they demanded that the directors be punished. They called for the directors of the company to be sewn in sacks, and they wanted them thrown into the River Thames to be drowned. The government had to do something to prevent a full-scale revolution, so they started a massive investigation to find out who was responsible. They arrested the directors of the company and seized their personal estates. They put them on trial and stripped them of their vast wealth. It looked like justice was being served to the angry public mob, but this is where the hidden logic of the system reveals itself. All the company directors were punished. The real architects escaped completely free. The politicians who took bribes to pass the laws were never touched. The king and his mistresses, who profited from the scheme, kept their money. The government used the company directors as scapegoats to hide their own crimes. They blamed the greedy businessmen, but they protected the corrupt political system. And then came the biggest trick of all, the so-called bailout. The government stepped in to save the economy from total collapse. Today, they transferred the debt of the South Sea Company to another institution. They moved the bad debt to the Bank of England and East India Company. This was the first time in history we saw a massive bailout. They taught us that if you are big enough, you cannot fail. The rich and powerful were protected, while the common people were destroyed. Does this story sound familiar to you in the modern world today? It should, because we have seen this movie many times before now. We saw it in the crash of 1929 in America. We saw it in the dot-com bubble of the year 2000. We saw it in the housing crisis of 2008. And we are seeing the exact same psychology in the crypto markets. The technology changes from paper stocks to digital tokens on a blockchain, but the human behavior remains exactly the same century after century. Greed, FOMO, height, and the inevitable crash that wipes out the latecomers. The South Sea Bubble was not just a historical event of the past, it was the blueprint for the modern financial system. We live in a system built on debt, promises, and the confidence of the public. As long as we believe the lie, the system keeps on working, but the moment we stop believing, the bubble bursts all over again. Isaac Newton learned this lesson the hard way and paid a price. He learned that you cannot calculate the madness of people with math. You cannot predict when the herd will turn and start to stampede. So what is the lesson for us watching this 300 years later? The lesson is that there is no such thing as easy money. If something sounds too good to be true, it is definitely a scam. If everyone from your barber to your taxi driver is buying it, then it is probably time for you to sell and get out. The game is rigged against the common man by the powerful elites, but if you understand the history, you can spot the trap early. You can protect yourself and your family from the next big crash. Thank you for watching this series on the South Sea Bubble scam. If you want to understand the hidden logic behind the world's events, you need to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications. We uncover the stories that the history books try to hide from you, because history is not just the past, it is a warning for tomorrow.